שלום למי שנמצא, שלום למי שנמצאת, אנחנו באמנות.יצירה.Live, סדרת השידורים של מרכז תיאטרון בובות ובית הספר לאמנות תיאטרון הבובות בחולון. אני מקווה שכולם וכולן ישובים וישובות בנחת, מי מול המחשב, מי מול הטלפון. השידור היום יעסוק בהעצמת קהילות ופרטים באמצעות תיאטרון בובות. התארחו כאן הבובנאית אנורופה מהודו, ועוד בובנאית ישראלית שעושה עבודה רגשית עם בני נוער, אבל כדי לדעת מי היא, צריך יהיה לגלות את חידת הטריוויה הלא-טרוויאלית של ג'ינג'ה. מי שצופה בנו בפייסבוק וגם ביוטיוב יכול להגיב אלינו בצ'אט, ואנחנו נשתדל להעלות את התגובות ואו את השאלות שלכם על המסך. כשאתם עושים את זה, תוכנה בשם StreamYard, תבקש מכם לאשר לה, להשתמש בשם ובתמונת הפרופיל שלכם. אם לא, אנחנו נראה את ההודעה ונוכל לשדר אותה, אבל לעולם לא נדע מי שאל. ואנחנו כבר מתחילים, ונגיד שלום, hello to Anuropa from India. Hello Anuropa.
Hello.
So how are you these days? What's happening in India?
I think the same as everywhere. We are locked down. We are working from home and quite restricted in our travel and the kind of contacts we can have with each other and the world in general.
So let me just I need to prepare it. Yes, I will just say some things about you so everybody will know who are you. So this is Anuropa and the rest will be in Hebrew. אנורופה היא מוכרת כאחד הכוחות המרכזיים בתחום תיאטרון הבובות בהודו. היא במאית, בובנאית והמייסדת והמנהלת של תיאטרון בובות כאחד, קבוצת תיאטרון שהוקמה בניו דלהי שבהודו ב-1998. היא בעלת תואר בתיאטרון בובות מטעם המכון לקולנוע, טלוויזיה, דרמה ורדיו באוניברסיטת סטוקהולם, שוודיה. ב-2002 היא הוכשרה בבית הספר לבובות כפפה מסורתיות בנפולי, איטליה. היא השתתפה בפרויקטים של מחקר בגרמניה ובצרפת. היא הייתה אורחת בשוויץ, אומנית אורחת ושמצאה כמרצה אורחת בפקולטה לאמנויות ב-UCLA בלוס אנג'לס בארצות הברית. בהודו היא בימה הצגות עבור כאחד, קבוצת התיאטרון שפועלת, מביימת ומשחקת בה, עבור בית הספר הלאומי לדרמה ועבור קבוצת תיאטרון הרחוב הפוליטית, שאני לא יודע להגיד את שמה. היא זכתה בפרס מטעם משרד התרבות ההודי על תרומה לתחום תיאטרון הבובות, וכיום היא המזכירה הכללית של אונימה הודו, הסניף ההודי של הארגון הבינלאומי לתיאטרון בובות. So you have to approve everything that I just said. So tell us a little bit about your personal history. When did you decide to be a puppeteer?
So I think the first puppet I had was given to me by my mother. I must have been 7 or 8 years old, and I remember still I found it the other day. It's a little monkey which you can wear on your hand, and I was playing that puppet in school for other children my age, to children in my class. And then when we were growing up, we went to a school which was had a lot of focus on the arts, and I remember that the younger children would be called in to watch all our shows, and we could have free classes, not study math and do puppet shows instead. So it became a reason to perform more and more. And one school friend and I, when we reached university, I studied history in university, in Delhi University, and it was so cool to do theatre in Delhi University. We had one of the most active theatre societies, and Delhi University has over 50 colleges which are always competing in drama festivals. And to tell people that I was actually secretly a puppeteer was in the beginning not very cool for a teenager, because everyone wanted to be an actor or an actress. And but habit got the better of me, and in university I was playing for some children who lived around our college. We had a community theatre that the college ran, and I was trying to hide it from the rest of my friends, but they saw the show. And at the end of the show, I was behind a curtain and I was playing these puppets, and I heard adult voices clapping and laughing. And then I lifted the curtain, and my whole class was watching this show. And it was the end of my secret that I was actually a puppeteer. But what it taught me is that, number one, puppet theater is not only for children, that adults really respond to puppet theater and they really watch puppet theater. And then while I was still in university, we started the company. Katha started in 1997 when I was 19 years old with some other people from university, a friend from school. And we were really just a very odd bunch of people in my parents' drawing room trying to set up a puppet company, playing wherever people would have us, in the lobby of a hotel or, you know, in a children's festival or at any place. And that's how it really starts, I think.
Is it common for females to be puppeteers in India?
So in India, we have a very, very rich tradition. We have a tradition which is almost 2,000 or 3,000 years old. And we have very particular forms. And so there's string, glove, rod, shadow, all 4 techniques, but very different from each other as you travel the regions of India. In the traditional form, there are lots of women puppeteers because a family performs together. So very often, the women will do the women voices, the men will do the male voices. Sometimes the men will do all the voices, the women will play the puppets. Sometimes the women will make the puppets and the men will play the puppets. So it's a much more mixed bag. But even there, I would say 2/3 of the performers are men and 1/3 is women. But wherever they are included, they're a very important part of the show because of ritual and religion also. Modern puppetry is quite different because modern puppetry in India is very young. It started sometime in the 50s. The first puppeteer who founded or started modern puppetry was someone called Meher Contractor. Meher Contractor had a theater, ran a theater out of the very famous Darpana Academy in Ahmedabad in India, in the state of Gujarat. And she started the puppet wing with a puppet school. And very famous puppeteer from India, Dadi Padamji, who is now the president of Unima International, is one of her students. So the whole movement of modern puppet theatre begins because of a woman in India. And ever since, I would say, there were both women and men puppeteers. But like in many things across the world, the directors were always men. And it's very rare even today, and I think in India as well. The number of women directors is growing, but it's nothing compared to the number of, whether it's cinema or theatre or puppet theatre, there are very few women directors. Maybe there are more women players, puppet players and puppet makers. So that definitely is a skewed balance.
Something that interests me, on one hand, you're saying that India has a very long tradition of puppetry, and on the other hand, you had to find out yourself that puppets are not just for children.
Yes. I think one of the reasons, I think tradition in India is so contextualized. We are a very large country, and language, regional culture is very deeply ingrained in the people of the region. So if you see our traditional art forms, they are very married to the geography of the space. So they come because of the climate, the people, the language, all of the mix of people, because India has also been a country of so much travel and immigration and, you know, cross-pollination. Because if you see traditional puppetry and you see the journey of shadow puppetry, for example, one of the oldest forms is shadow puppetry. It starts from the west coast of India, doesn't exist there anymore, started about 2,000 years ago. The puppeteers start to travel down the coast. For some reason, they don't go all the way to the south. They go off to the east, take a U-turn and come back to the south. In this journey, acquiring completely new languages, aesthetics, they speak now not the original language, but languages they've picked up on their migration of 1,000 years. So it's a very interesting anthropological and a linguistic exercise to follow the journey of puppetry. What the puppeteer is in Indian society, like in Indonesia or you know, for example, in Bali or Malaysia, they're not just performers. They are shamans. They are advisors. Very often they arrange marriages. So they go from one village and find a boy, in another village they find a suitable girl, and they're still doing it in the villages of India. But I come from, and these are generational forms, so 9 generations, 11 generations of puppetry passed on in the family. Whereas I come from not generational puppetry, it's completely modern puppet theater. And my access, and this is very interesting, the access I had to traditional puppetry was so limited. Growing up in a city like New Delhi, the only puppet theater we could see was the string puppets of Rajasthan. Because the puppeteers were gypsies, they traveled across the country. They also had a big colony in New Delhi. So we all knew about that, but we had no idea growing up about, and even now when I talk to people in India, I do a lecture in India and I say, do you know what puppetry is? Everyone will say Rajasthani puppets. And this is across India. So I think as a modern puppeteer, you discover this kind of, you wrap your head around this diversity, this kind of magnitude that puppetry is, only when you really go deep into the form. And it's very interesting. I actually discovered a lot of the forms when I was studying in Sweden and not in India. It's only when I come back from Dramatiska that I physically went in search of the other traditional forms and traveled to basically meet the other puppeteers and watch other forms of puppetry. And now we have a puppet training program in Unima, India. And one of the key things we are trying to address is that students start early and we give them, the first exposure we give them to is the diversity of Indian puppetry, to have access to all the forms, to meet the masters of the form, to be able to watch as many shows as possible. And I think that's the big progress we have made since the time that I started in '97 with very little access to training. So we had no puppet school in India. We had no training programs in India. If you wanted to be a puppeteer, you walked up to another puppeteer and said, hello, I want to be a puppeteer. Please take me into your company or train me. And it was really, very informal. My first few puppet teachers, it was just working with a company or learning how to carve something because they had a show, or being a part of a show and learning bottom up to first watch the puppet and then hold a puppet backstage, and then hand someone a puppet and then actually start playing and actually start making. We were lucky that in modern puppetry, because it was such a small family, we had a lot of support. Puppeteers easily took you in and taught you, the older puppeteers. But I think a school is very necessary, a formal school. We have a school, it's a seasonal school we are running right now, but a long-term formal school is very necessary to know much more deeply our own heritage, to develop a discourse around our own heritage, and also to understand that puppetry is as serious a training as for a dancer or a musician or an actor. This is a serious art form.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing that we are trying to do here. Yes. Also, because you can't move forward, you can't move to the future if you don't know your past. Although Israel is a very young country, and puppetry-wise, it's even younger. So we adopted lots of traditions, but still there were puppeteers here in Israel who struggled to do their art, mainly people who came from Eastern Europe. And this is one of the things that we do here through our museum, not just displaying puppets, but also doing the research, and one day hopefully we'll be able to publish it. Speaking of modern puppetry, I think now it's a very good time to show the non-trivial trivia question of ג'ינג'ה, so let's just watch it. אנחנו נראה עכשיו את החידה, וכמובן אתם מוזמנים לנחש ולכתוב לנו תשובות בצ'אט.
אני מסלפפת כעת במעלה המדרגות של בית הספר לאומנות תיאטרון הבובות בחולון. מתחתיי קומה אחת ומעליי קומה אחת נוספת, ואני תוהה כמה כיתות וכמה קומות צריך כדי להעביר שיעור אחד בזום. וזו החידה. הבובנאית הזו היא בוגרת בית הספר לאומנות תיאטרון הבובות. בהכשרתה היא שחקנית ששיחקה בתיאטרון הרפרטוארי והמסחרי, אבל היא מוכרת בעיקר בשל תפקיד משמעותי באחד הסרטים המדוברים של השנים האחרונות, בו גילמה את אמו של מי שבמעשיו הרס את תקוותם של אנשים רבים. מי היא? בהצלחה!
אז זו החידה של ג'ינג'ה, מי היא הבובנאית המסתורית? אתם מוזמנים לנסות לנחש. רמז, עלו עליה כמה פוסטים בדף של מרכז תיאטרון בובות חולון בעבר, אבל אל תגלשו, תישארו איתנו. So, tell us now about the כאחד theater. The name is combined from two words.
Yes, so it comes from a kat, which is wood, and katha, which is stories, and it's a word coined by one of our friends who was a Natya Shastra expert from many years ago. She said, this is the name you should have. It's direct and yet indirect, and so the name just stayed with us, and we are essentially about stories mostly, and material, and communities, so it's apt for us.
So I will just tell about your journey to Israel some years ago. זה היה לפני די הרבה שנים, 2006. Was it 2006 or 2007? Did you get to see the center? 7. So that was the first festival. Yeah, but you perform out of the center in a bigger theater. הקבוצה הגיעה להופיע כאן את About Ram, היה כזה כשאת לתרגם את זה, אודות רם. And that was the first time I narrated the soundtrack. I was skipped to Hebrew. אנחנו חששנו שהסיפור על רם, שהוא כל כך מוכר לילדים בהודו, יהיה פחות מוכר לילדים בארץ, וכדי לידד אותו, בתאום עם הקבוצה הוספנו כמה משפטי מפתח, ואני בחרדת קודש הקלטתי אותם, והשמיעו את זה בעולם, והתגובות היו מצוינות. People still remember your show, and it's a good opportunity, I think, to watch the clip. For those who didn't see it, I have to say, as I told you before, for us it was a novelty to see a show that combines video projections for 2007, and it was like nobody, maybe some people dreamt about it in Israel, but nobody dared to do it. So let's just watch the clip.
The story starts when Ram is sitting across the sea. He's an exiled prince. He can see Lanka, the island where Sita is held captive, but he does not know how to cross the sea. His entire life flashes past as a memory as he looks at his ring. How is he going to cross this vast ocean? Wait and watch About Ram.
So, as cruel as it may be, we don't have the time to show the whole clip, but I will say, whoever wants, I'll say it in Hebrew, מי שרוצה לראות את הקליפים המלאים של ההצגות, שחלקן נראה כאן, אבל לא באורך המלא, אתם מוזמנים להיכנס לערוץ היוטיוב של כאחד ולראות שם את הקליפים. So that was about Ram, and it wasn't the first show of the theater. Of the company.
No. The first show of the theater was in 1998. This was one of our. So I think this show premiered in 2005 or 2006. But it was a turning point for us because we started working very specifically with Bunraku Theatre and the whole idea of 3 puppeteers, 1 puppet, and the whole idea of the actor and the puppeteer being part of the show. So it was a very particular turning point for the company and the work that we do, and to dip into a lot of traditional forms to create something new, because the Ramayana in India is a very, very old story, and it's a very common epic. But we were looking at all the performing arts which use the Ramayana. So there was dancing, there was Kathakali, Chhau, masks, and of course Bunraku theatre, and some amount of Thai rod puppetry as well. So it was looking at all the regions which use the Ramayana as the basis of the narratives of their traditional art forms. So the show for us was a very, very important turning point of looking at what the South and Southeast Asian narrative identity is about, and what is the space that all our art forms are born from. And then as a modern performer, interpreter, what is it that you're tweaking and changing for an audience of today? So that way, this was a very important turning point in our career.
And who are the people that are in the company? How do you choose them? Because as we can see in the clip, for me, I asked you several times along the years, are they puppeteers? Because they look like dancers.
Yes, a lot of them are dancers. A lot of them are. So it's a very organic company. A lot of people walked into the company to stay 1 month to train. This is our company, current company, I should say. But also some people have moved on, built their own companies, because one of the things that we mandated in Katkatha, this is the extended family, people, their wives, their girlfriends, their boyfriends, everyone together. So we really are a big family. We have people who come and want to, train in the company for 2 months. They end up living for 3 years with us. Then they go home and they start their own company in their own region. And we've actually formalized it now. And we expect that then when a new puppeteer joins us, they will leave us at some time, and we will provide them all the support to leave to start their own company in their own space. Because since there is not a regular formal school, a company often becomes the school and training ground for a new puppeteer. And one of the key elements that we find you need as a puppeteer after you've finished your training is that initial support structure, where your work needs a place to be presented, a little bit of hand-holding and support, somebody telling you it's okay to make mistakes, take some risks. And increasingly, I think we are becoming that space of people to experiment and try and fail and try again. And so many of our puppeteers, and I'm very, very happy to say this, is even in the company, we are becoming an ensemble, because out of 8 puppeteers, 6 of them have their own companies. So it's a really rich experience, because they go away and do their own style, and they come back to do a project together, and they bring something new each time people come back. And their backgrounds are, somebody started as a sculptor, somebody started as a dancer, somebody would start as an actor, and somebody would start as a builder. So we have many, many different kinds of people.
And are you trying to bring them to the same level for those who are more of artists, the puppet builders or the designer? You try to teach them how to manipulate? Do they do the same training?
Yes, almost the same training. One of the key things we have gone to now is we do a lot of basic components training, which is we have a lot of emphasis on physicality, because so much of our performances are dependent on choreography and movement. So no matter what background, even the person who doesn't really like to move, is a puppet builder, wants to sit on a chair and carve wood, they have to go through the basic physical training. All puppet movers, whether it's a string puppeteer or anyone, has to go through this very basic martial art training we do once or twice a year. We also make sure that everybody knows some amount of building, repairing, because also we are a small company. When we travel, we're only 4 or 5, and everybody must know everything. Everybody must know how to set up, strike down, repair something backstage. Something goes wrong, you fill in. So yes, I think that's been key to the survival of the company.
No, we have some Wi-Fi problems. You got stuff. Okay. So while you were speaking, I just posted some of the comments, which were all of them were compliments. I'll just go back and say, fascinating. What a unique combination of arts and techniques, and another fascinating. And Avital Dvori, she's trying to guess that the puppeteer we were asking about is Anat Revnitsky, but as always, I never reveal the answer. I just keep a poker face, and אביטל, you will have to wait, אבל אביטל אני שמח שלא פספסת את זה ב5, כי זה לא היה ב5, זה עכשיו ב7. Okay, so let's show the clip that I found so interesting, and that was like actors training. And when I saw the name, I expected to see one thing, and then I got to see this.
कलाकारी के लिए एनर्जी चाहिए, कंसंट्रेशन चाहिए, फोकस चाहिए, अलर्ट चाहिए, brain work. Actually, we are playing with our mind, not body.
Okay, so we won't get to see it all. מי שרוצה לראות את הקליפ המלא יכול בערוץ היוטיוב של התיאטרון קטקטה לראות את כולו. So these are puppeteers?
Yes, all of them.
And why do they need that? I mean, it's fun. I know it's fun. But
no, it's actually very difficult and very strenuous and very, because it's 2.5 hours when we do this for a month. We have a special teacher who comes from Kerala, and it's 2.5 hours from 6:30 to 8:30 every morning, or maybe 9 o'clock, and your body is killing you by the end of it. But I think it's a discipline we've gone into over the last 6 years. And one of the key things in our training was centering to be a puppeteer. To really, your body needs to be very high energy for such a long time on stage. And I find that actors, performers, dancers are the only exception probably who take their body so seriously. But everybody else is, when I'm rehearsing, I'll exercise a little bit, I'll warm up, I'll, stretch a bit, and then I'll go on stage because I know how to do this. I'm so good at this. But you know that the injuries happen because of this. And I think it's also a certain body awareness. We've started to build the breath, how you hold your body. With puppets, for example, the puppeteer's back, thighs, the arm. We have to have really a strong backbone to hold up the puppet. We are holding a position for hours and hours. So it's A, strength, B, centering, and C, I think it's discipline. It was one of the ways in which I could convince puppeteers that discipline makes a difference in your life. Because everyone's like, that's for classical dancers, that's for ballet dancers, that's for classical musicians, that's not for us. Puppeteers, we just do it. But you see how over a period of time, what you can do goes away. It disappears if you don't keep in the practice of either your craft, your technique, this thing of manipulating the puppet, articulating the puppet. And it's helped the team so much with just the way work is approached, the way we are able to hold ourselves on stage. For example, if you see the Mahabharat, it's a 75-minute performance. We have 5 people performing a show, which in any traditional form will be 60 actors, or at least 25 actors. And we are just quickly coming in, going out. And one of the things you tend to do when you're playing something so physically and then going behind a puppet to be so still is you could either go completely still when you're supposed to be physical, or your puppet could really look spastic. So this switching over, it really helped us with this martial art practice, and to really work on breath, the breathing of the puppet, and the livingness of the puppet and understanding the body of the puppet was very important.
So you mentioned the Mahabharata. We have the clip of Mahabharata. We will keep it for later because I want to, I mean, it's fascinating to talk about the theatrical work, but let's talk about the community work and the empowerment work you are doing with different communities. I will just talk about צונמיקה in Hebrew for a minute. ב-2008 במסגרת כנס הבובה כטיפולי הקרנו סרט קצר על פרויקט שהתיאטרון עשה בכפר של נפגעי צונאמי. So how did this project of the Tsunamika fell into your hands? Was it by choice?
It was an accident, and if there are anything like accidents, and a lot of things in our journey have been these very happy accidents. We got a call from the community which was making the dolls. So Tsunamika is a little doll which came after the tsunami hit the coast of India, Sri Lanka in 2009. I forget the year now. The big tsunami which really wiped out a lot of population. And one of the first things that happened is these villages across Tamil Nadu, which is the east coast of India, southeastern coast of India, apart from the loss of lives, they had lost all their boats, their fishing boats, and their livelihood. Now, it's a very unique community because the women are in charge of the money in the community. The men go fishing, they come back, they go fishing really late in the night. So it's 2 in the morning, they'll go fishing. They come back by 6 in the morning, really tired with all the fish. They will take the fish out of the nets, hand it to the women who actually then go to the market, sell the fish, keep the money, decide what happens to the money. So it goes to the children's education, savings for the family, Now with the tsunami and the fishing boats going away, the government policy was to give dole to the fishermen, to give money in compensation because of the natural disaster. Now the money went to the men, not to the women. And very interestingly, right next to the office which was giving the dole money was the official alcohol shop. So the men would get the dole money, go straight to the alcohol shop, buy the alcohol. And it became a tremendous problem. And 6 months after the tsunami, there was a social disaster in these 3 villages. So the women's cooperative called us up because they found some of our other work online. We had just finished a project in Kashmir with women, where the women had made a lot of artwork, and there were narrative-based projects. So they said, a local design company, a very innovative design company, they used to make clothes in Pondicherry in a place called Auroville. And this very famous fashion designer, she said, the way to help the women is if they could make these dolls called Tsunamikas, instead of being given dole, they could have something in exchange of the money. So the women started to make dolls, and a lot of support poured in internationally to support the women, to reclaim their financial power. And it became something huge till they discovered that Tsunamika now needed a story. So they found us, the puppeteers. They called us. We made a whole Tsunamika performance with the women telling the story of Tsunamika and who she was. And she was the daughter of the ocean. So it turned into something which was not a commercial good, but something which had a new reason to live in a certain way, to reclaim their financial power, but also this opportunity, because the fishing community, women, they're just there. Nobody has ever heard their stories or their aspirations or their dreams. So the Tsunamika became a way of them to share their stories, which eventually became a comic book, a performance, a couple of songs. So they were really putting their word out there, and a very powerful women's cooperative emerged from it, which is still running. Now they have, it's been years and years, now they run a cooperative which is supporting the education of all their children, especially the higher education and of the girls in the community especially. So that was the project basically. So
you also mentioned the project in Kashmir.
Yes, that was 2006, yes.
And it's a region that the fighting never ends.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
The people there live like in any conflict region.
Yes,
absolutely. Like in Israel, that we live the conflict every day, every minute. People live in constant trauma.
Yes.
So what kind of work you did with them?
Well, again, it was narrative work, but with puppets. And I think one of the very interesting thing of working with puppets is that the attention is not directed to the person and their body and, a replaying of trauma in the body, but it's directed outside the body with material which is dead material, which is so the focus shifts. And one of the things that that happens in art-based therapy is the minute focus shifts to paper or to clay or to material, it is turned out of the body and it is replayed. The narrative is not just replayed, which for a very long time it was believed that therapy is retelling the story. But I come from a school of thought where I don't believe that therapy is just telling the story again. That's only repeating the trauma. It is about really addressing and altering the narrative. So if you're constantly going to play the victim, oh, this terrible thing happened to us, historically it happened to us, it's happened to me last week, it happened to me last year, it happened to my mother, it happened to my grandmother. The problem is that the trauma continues and continues and continues till you believe your identity is that of a victim. What happens with puppet theater is, as an outside player of the material, you're in a position to alter the destiny of the material. And metaphorically, what it tells you is that you're in a position to alter your own destiny and choose an identity which is not of a victim. So in Kashmir, it worked very powerfully because we worked in a particular village where one incident had affected a lot of the children. They were going to a wedding ceremony. There were crossfires. In the crossfires, all the adults had died. And the children had just remained with all these dead people for a very long time till they were discovered and rescued. And yeah. Now, all these young women we were working with between the ages of 16 and 22 had PTSDs. And the PTSDs were so similar. It was all the same recurring nightmare, this association with color, especially the color red, and certain association with certain smells. And they already had two psychologists, which was a part of the program I was called into by WISCOM. With the clinical psychologists, they kept coming up against a brick wall. They didn't know what was happening, why all 22 women had PTSDs. We were only working with women at that point, not with the men or the young men in that village. And it was in a narrative telling with newspaper, just puppets, just newspaper and tape, that we discovered that all 22 of them had the same story. And we asked some of the older people in the village, we said, what happened? And they told us the story. So nobody knew that the story had happened. So it's very interesting how puppets are able to reveal something which doesn't come out orally. It's never told to you, but it can be expressed through dead material because it's so mundane, it's so non-threatening. You're expressing it, but not really, because you're talking through metaphors only. In fact, we tried an experiment with a suggestion from the counselor, the psychiatrist, is we replayed some of the nightmares, the recurring nightmares, which is very classic PTSD again. And we would actually play it in paper. And one of them was a chase. A lot of women had these same nightmare of being chased, where a person actually turns around, the paper puppet turns around and looks at the object chasing her and realizes it's paper and crushes it or burns it. And in 6 weeks, the dream stopped. So it's very interesting. There is no scientific research on what really happens. There is a whole field of art-based therapy, which is, of course, opening up right now, and people are talking about concrete ideas. I'm going back to Kashmir, as a matter of fact, next week. Physically, I can't travel yet. It's an online project with 30 school children. And it'll be very interesting to see how Kashmir has changed and not changed. But also we have this wonderful medium online medium where you don't really have to travel, but you can still meet children and work with children and talk to them. And next year, the plan is to go and actually work with them for 3 months early in the year.
So now we will see the question again. It's like we say in Hebrew, a sharp turn from this story, which really touches the heart. So we will see the question, and then we'll talk a little more about the community work you do through theater. So here we go.
אני עדיין נמצאת ליד מבנה בית הספר לאמנות תיאטרון הבובות בחולון. שנת הלימודים תיפתח כאן אחרי החגים. ועד אז אני תוהה עם איזו קפסולה אהיה השנה בחג. עם הקפסולה של הגפילטה פיש או הקפסולה של החריימה? אוי! וזו החידה. הבובנאית הזו היא בוגרת בית הספר לאמנות תיאטרון הבובות בחולון. בהכשרתה היא שחקנית ששיחקה בתיאטרון הרפרטוארי והמסחרי, אבל היא מוכרת בעיקר בשל תפקיד משמעותי באחד הסרטים המדוברים של השנים האחרונות, בו גילמה את אמו של מי שבמעשיו הרס את תקוותם של אנשים רבים. מי היא? בהצלחה!
מי היא? So, your community work. Tell us about that.
Like in the Tsunami Project, we've been traveling a lot, and we work with a lot of collectives who invite us. They could be in villages and cities, and a lot of our art projects span many different situations. So this was gully cricket. Cricket is a complete obsession in India. People in India watch cricket, play cricket. Children grow up playing cricket on the streets. So when the public spaces of Delhi were getting extremely divided between the rich and the poor, gated communities had started getting built. This is about 10, 12 years ago. We started playing cricket matches wearing these masks in public spaces. And they were just sports with local young people from the locality. The only thing was that we would play 3 overs of the game, and we would have an umpire, we would have someone writing score, but there would be no ball. So there would be a bat, there would be everything, there would be no ball. And in the beginning, people would like, what is going on here? But 15 or 20 minutes into the game, and we did this about 8-9 times, somebody from the audience would come and argue with the umpire, the scorekeeper, and say, no, you gave the wrong decision. That was a no ball. And it was so interesting that the audience was so involved in the game that they started to see this invisible ball. And this is India, this is New Delhi. So we never had 2 or 3 people. We had at least 600 or 1,000 or sometimes 1,500 people watching this match. At some point, one of us would pretend to be hurt. We would leave the match. Somebody from the audience would be called in to bat. We have played this game for 3 or 4 hours sometimes with
the huge masks all the time on your head.
Only us with the mask, but the audience with no mask. And we would give, after 3 overs, we'd slowly give the game to them. And you had the public playing cricket with an invisible ball. Completely comfortable. These are not actors. These were people from like, hey, do you think you can help us? I'm a little hurt. You want to bat? And it was incredible how it became this big conversation about what is performance and what is theater and what is inclusion and who is an audience and who's a performer and how does this, the third wall break. So we did a lot of these community shows, and it was also a way for us to build this youth participation in puppet theater. This is a very exciting project. This was, we did almost 40 shows on the back of this truck. This truck traveled through the villages of Eastern India in Bihar, Jharkhand. And these women are incredible. These are young girls who took a stand in their own lives and the lives of their school friends and stopped child marriages, which is still common in India and illegal, but is something of a social practice. They would barge into these weddings and say, stop. This girl is 14, she can't be married. That's just not happening. So they have a cooperative again. It's a young women's cooperative. And the NGO which was supporting them said, these women are doing a lot of theater, but what they need is visibility. Do you think you can build some puppets with them? So we traveled with our own big masks. We did a performance. They had built these 2 giant bamboo puppets. And we would travel together on the back of a truck, jump off the truck, and perform sometimes for 7,000 or 8,000 people because in the village market or in a really big event in the village, and it was very cool. This is in Buxton in the Midlands in England. this was a similar community project. This was with grandchildren and grandparents. And we were working with a company, a puppet theater company. And this particular 2 schools that they had adopted, there were huge incidents of bullying. And the grandparents community, the grandparents were brought in to bring in some sort of conversations around bullying in the school, how it's not okay that you get bullied or you bully someone. And there were these puppets that the children built together, and big conversations happened, and it was this big circus-esque show that happened. So a lot of the work we do in communities are extremely political as well. This is one of the resistance art pieces when there was the protest in New Delhi against the CAA law, and many artists and many citizens were protesting. These were in celebration of the protesting women, because most of the protesters were women. They were grandmothers, mothers, who took to the streets, sat in the streets with candles day in, day out. This was a sculpture to commemorate them, and they started popping out and popping up in many of the protest sites.
Do you see any significance in doing community work besides the theatrical work? Is it like two different sections, or there's some link between them?
It's completely linked. I think for us, one of the biggest things is that everything we do very often comes in from what's happening around us. And increasingly, it's the voices we hear from the communities. It's the voices we hear from the people we work with. And the work is mostly responding to circumstances and situations and people we have met. One of the key aspects in our work has been where we have been situated. We have a small theater space. It's not like a theater house, but a studio. And now it's in a village just outside New Delhi. And from there, we run a community theater for the children. It's the neighborhood village. So this is what it looks like outside. If you see the village, it's dirt tracks, a lot of these carts and tractors. This is inside the studio. We received the space. It was an old abandoned house. Now it's like replanted. With every wall is painted, and the children, there are about 100 children running around every Saturday, every Sunday. And the idea is, this is our children painting the wall outside. It's a tough neighborhood. We've had lots of problems in the neighborhood of drugs, drug dealing, gangs. And the idea is that what is the meaning of art for people? I mean, is it only to be consumed in galleries? Is it only for something you can buy, or is it something you live? And in which case, it's probably for all humanity. And I think if it has to be for human beings, then it also has to come somewhere from human beings. And that's the basic principle. And I think all our performances come from the concerns of the community and the voices in the communities. Because if you see the Mahabharata, it's about conflict. And it was the inception of the Mahabharata as a show happened in this space. And it's a show for adults with a difficult subject of why would you choose conflict? Because human beings want to survive. The essential idea is to live. Then why would you choose something which essentially equals to death? And the fact that we had young children watching this and ask us such interesting questions about this kind of subject. And I think it also came from being in this community, which is so much about conflict, which is so much about day-to-day survival, and where people want to survive. Yeah.
We're Israelis. We don't know what you're talking about. Conflict is not a word that we even know. We need a dictionary each time, again and again and again. What's like? So, but you mentioned the Mahabharata like 3 times, so we have to watch the clip.
The story starts when Ram is sitting across the...
That's not the right one.
No, that's our Ram.
Yeah.
आश्चर्यचकित दुर्योधन इधर से उधर देखता हुआ छपाक एक तालाब में गिर जाता है।
Without them, my life, this shell, I hurl it at Krishna and hope it shatters his world.
Okay. So you have special activities for children, right? Used to have.
Yes. Used to have. Yes. Well, we're doing some stuff online, but unfortunately not as much as we would like to do. This is our Sunday club, and yeah, it's very unfortunate. We don't have it anymore. We also don't know where the children are. We have been trying to locate some of them. There are, when
this
the
is something,
lockdown,
this is something that is not so understandable because Israel is not that big and most of us are still in our original places. People didn't move around because of the epidemic. And what I understood from you is that people just left their places and went to other places. So you lost contact with.
Yes, especially the very poor, because the city, while you know all our big metro cities, and the metro cities in India are huge. New Delhi has a population of 16 or 18 million. So in this, there are the people who live in the cities, but there's the people who service the cities. You know, they clean the cities, they cook for people, they drive the taxis. These are often very poor people who would have migrated from a village to come and live in the city and work in the city. And the minute the country was locked down, it meant you had no work, but you still would have to pay rent. And you would still have to feed your family, but there was no source of work coming in. And because the lockdown was so abrupt, most of these people walked home. And when I say walked home, I mean between 600 and 1,800 kilometers on foot with children and everything they owned. And it was, I think, the biggest catastrophe of our country since probably the partition of India, of just human catastrophe and the kind of agony and the kind of suffering that people had. And one of the reasons is a lot of people who moved back to their villages, we really don't know where they are. So a lot of the children we were working with, their parents were workers, wage laborers, taxi drivers, cleaners, and so yeah, it's we will really not know the extent of the tragedy till maybe when the lockdown is completely over and we really can investigate and find out what happened.
And rebuild your community.
Yes, absolutely.
So speaking about children, this is going to lead us to the solution of the non-trivial question. We will see it, and then we will see how it all connects. So הנה לנו הפתרון.
והתשובה לחידה היא הבובנאית רבניצקי. היא החלה את דרכה בלהקת פיקוד המרכז, ולאחר מכן למדה משחק. לאחר מספר שנים על הבמות, היא יצאה לדרך חדשה בעולם היהדות, ופנתה להנחיית סדנאות לנערות ולנשים בכל הגילאים. ענת ובן זוגה שביט רבניצקי גם נפגשים עם קהלים שונים במופעים מוזיקליים, ובשיחות בהם הם מגוללים את סיפורם, הן האישי והן המשותף. מאז שלמדה בבית הספר לאמנות תיאטרון הבובות את תחום תיאטרון הבובות הטיפולי, היא גם מנחה סדנאות העצמה ותהליכים רגשיים ותקשורתיים באמצעות בובות תיאטרון עם בני נוער שנמצאים בחלופת מעצר. ומנחה קבוצות במוזיאון לאמנות תיאטרון הבובות בחולון. ב-2019 היא כיכבה בסרט ימים נוראים זוכה הפרסים, ובו שיחקה את גאולה אמיר, אמו של רוצחו של יצחק רבין.
עומד הסנטר למעלה. תהיה גאה. אתה נועדת לגדולות.
באותה שנה היא גם שיחקה בסרט החשוב עוד יותר, ג'ינג'ה רוצה בובת תיאטרון. כל כך הרבה חומרים, גם אני רוצה לדעת איך לבנות בובה כזאת.
אני משוכנעת שכשתהיי יותר מבוגרת, אם תחליטי שזה מה שאת רוצה לעשות, את תלמדי ותדעי איך לבנות בובות מכל מיני חומרים.
אכן, משחק עוצמתי. שלי.
ואביטל צדקת, והבובנאית היא אכן ענת רבניצקי שמצטרפת אלינו ממש ברגע זה. שלום ענת.
ערב טוב, ערב טוב.
So Anat will speak a little bit in English.
Okay.
We will speak about the film, about the special scene in the film, and about the work you are doing in the rehabilitating.
Okay.
But let's start with the workshop you had in India.
Yes, it was in 2018, I think. We've been in India a year before with the family, and my husband 25 years ago was in India, and he met the women that in Rishikesh, that she how do you say, like took the children and make this village for orphan children. And he said that he must come back and do something for these children. And we decided that we were going to Rishikesh, and we called the place and we asked them that they want to volunteer and come and make puppets with them. And it was amazing. No language, they don't know us, but the interaction was so fluent and so with love, and it was something like an hour and a half that we were doing puppets with them, and it was joyful. And we came after a year with the family again, and they remembered us and they welcomed us very nicely, and it was amazing work with them. I think the puppet is the treasure here. I mean, when you don't have a language and you don't know the people, but you bring something from your heart, and I believe in the puppet, because the puppet is so, you don't need anything, you just have to have her there, that's it. And then your heart is speaking. And with the children, it was so, with no words. And they were playing, and they loved to make them, and it was really amazing work with them.
But it's not a surprise. I mean, we do know it, that puppet works like magic on both children and adults, although adults wouldn't admit it.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about that picture from the film. Yeah, well, so I have to skip to Hebrew because it's too much of Israeli information.
Okay.
No, I would say it. I will be polite. I would say it in Hebrew. So this woman with the very well-known murderer, the prime murderer, she was a kindergarten teacher.
Yes.
But in that specific scene, you chose to do it with a puppet, where she in her kindergarten, and that came as a surprise. I mean, it's a bit the mixing of the words for me was a bit shocking when I saw it. Just also,
I forgot about it. You reminded me, actually.
Yeah, during the
an exercise with the kids, because it was a scene, and they brought something like 7 or 8 children that didn't know me, and I'm supposed to be their kindergarten, and I was supposed to, it was supposed to be nice and lovely and warm, and I said, how am I going to represent myself? So I brought the puppet, and I started to speak with them before we shoot the scene, and they came around me, and we had like a game, and that's it. That we knew each other, and they didn't know nothing. And they sat, and I continued with the puppet because it was so mitbakesh, how do you say?
Obvious.
Obvious, yes.
Obvious.
Yeah.
So this will, I hope, I mean, this will become a part of the history, that this woman was a puppeteer also. She was working with puppet as an education tool, and hopefully that was not the way she educated her son.
Right.
Right,
no,
so you...
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. No, you wanted to say?
Puppets are really, I found it, when I studied in our school in Holon, it was like 8 years ago, I think. For me, it was like a new world opening. And we say that adults, they say, no, puppets is for kids. But when I heard that it's therapeutic, I understood that I really wanted it, because I was dealing with therapy in a way by theater, because I'm an actress and I had groups. But for me, the puppet was like a new world for me. And I said, if it's a new world for me, it probably will be a new world for everyone I will try to teach or to interact with with the puppet. And the place I'm working in with the youth, it's instead of being in prison, they are coming to this village for 3 months or 6 months, until 6 months. Sometimes they are for a year, and like to start their life again. And what I'm doing with them is I take the model of a story in 6 questions, okay? And for me, that's the model that I took from all the studies. That's my treasure. And it's amazing to see what stories are coming up. As you said before, Anurupa, that it's not, even if you're a victim, you want to bring a new solution. And a lot of them, when they write with me a story, and they're coming from drugs and from violence and from terror, really horrible stories. And actually, I tell them, and it's the true thing, I don't mind what you've done. It's not my story. I want from now on, let's see what we're doing together. And a lot of them, the stories like the hero is got killed somebody, and I said, just a second, let's try to find something else. That's what you want. I work with women that are under violence at home as well. And one of them told me that when she wrote the story, that she was killed. She never had love, and she doesn't deserve to be loved. And I said, just a second, let's think about a princess. You want to be a princess? And she said, yes. So I said, let's write a story about a princess, not about you. It was amazing to see where she got. I mean, the father in the story was actually the husband, that he was terrorizing her. And afterwards, it occurred to, I understood that the father was terrorizing her as well. And all she wanted in this story is to say, I want to be independent, to choose my life. And she's very young, she's like 30 years old, and she's with 3 kids. And she's beautiful, and she's talented, and she's intelligent, and I was shocked. When you come to a place that lives with women, more than the youth, you see ordinary women. You don't see, I think just one woman that she was with broken leg and broken arm and no teeth, that you can see that she was
victimized.
Yes, and when the stories are coming up, it's amazing. And the puppet is doing it to them. First of all, to create the puppet. And I'm doing a very, very simple puppets. Table puppets. Yes, like this.
Yeah, tabletop.
Yes, tabletop. And it's amazing to see when the youth are coming to work with me and they say, oh, come on, what, we're children, I don't want to. But when I once put the puppets on the table, and they see the puppets, they don't need me anymore. They're just coming, taking the puppets, and they're playing. And it was not a long time ago, there was 2 Ethiopian kids that they are very shy mentally. They are very shy. They don't speak. They don't want to, that nobody will see them. And I put the puppets on the table, one of the classes, and I took off the curtain from the table, and they saw the puppets. They magnetized to the table. Each one took a puppet. And I asked them to make a scene. And those 2 kids didn't want to do anything. They said, no, we're not playing, but they took 2 brown puppets, and they started to speak in their language between themselves on the bench, not in front of all of them. And they understood that it doesn't matter if somebody sees you or doesn't see you. The puppet, she has an impact, a very big impact. For example, one of the kids has a mother, probably she was blind in one eye, and he wrote a story that every time that his mother came to school, he used to scream at her and to send her away and curse her. And I didn't know if it's the real story, but afterwards he said, yes, my mother is crippled, and I was very shy. That's why I put like the eye, that it was more aesthetic, because she was very fat, and she was on a wheelchair, and I was very ashamed that this is my mother. But the school manager and one of his friends told him, this is your mother, you have only one mother. Now, when a kid like this when this story comes approached to his audience are his friends in the place, I always tell them, we are not a repertory theater, we are not a bima, a camera, nothing. We are just showing a process until now what we got. And when they stand there and say, it's very amazing when the other kids see that, they get the, like, they want to do it as well. They want to tell their stories. And it's kids with the, how do you say?
Yes.
Like they're criminals, they're coming from criminal.
Juvenile criminals, yeah.
Yes. And for them to touch a puppet or to speak to a puppet is strange. But once they're holding it, it's just. This week I finished one of the scenes of the projects. One of the kids that is very shy, he almost didn't hear him. And when I did rehearsal with him, I worked with him about the projection, for his self-confidence, because I saw that he has things to say, but he doesn't dare to say. And he did something about legalization of grass. But for a person that is a soldier, that it was, I don't know how to say, halum krav. Was wounded mentally in the war.
Post-traumatic.
Post-traumatic, exactly. Yeah. And he wanted to legalize drugs for people that need it to heal themselves. And he himself and most of the kids there are using drugs, heavy drugs, and horrible stories.
What do you think is the power of the puppet?
For me, it's
we know that the result is magic, but what is the power of that tool?
For them, you mean? For the kids or for the women? Or for me?
I think firstly for you.
For me, it's like to make some kind of transition from the inside of me to an object. If I created it, fine, because the visual will say something as well. But sometimes it's just something that comes from my inside that the doll, even if she doesn't speak, can say more than I can say.
You can't say doll.
Sorry,
someone might throw you away from the broadcasting.
Sorry. Yes, the puppet speaks for me, but sometimes deeper than what I can say, even if she doesn't speak, even just if it's movements or if it's her look, it will be always different than what I as an actor will do. And for the kids, I think the puppet, or for the women, I see it when I work with them, it's really magic. First of all, it's a challenge for them because they create it, but when they see the result of the creation of the puppet, they're amazed, and sometimes they don't believe that they made them. I did that. This is mine, and it gives them like this boy I talked about previously, that he started to speak with a loud voice, and he started to flow the conversation with us, the dialogue. Like suddenly I didn't speak, and he did all the speaking. And for me, this is the price for me.
Anuropa, I want to ask you something because with your activities, with your history, since you started, you broke, I think, many stereotypes. And, I think you were broadening the horizons of the Indian puppetry, and I think among the three of us and all the people who are watching, we can agree that the puppet is a superior tool and that it works, and it can work all over, not just for people who are traumatized. It can work for also the let's say non-traumatized audience of people who sit in the, and yet it doesn't manage to become. It's not common. How that? What's your explanation?
I think I have a theory about this. I don't know if it really people would agree to it. I think puppets are essentially dead material, and I think when anyone in the audience watches a puppet, they're actually investing life in dead material, because no matter how good a puppeteer you are, the puppet never really lives. It only lives in the head of the audience. So I think when an actor is playing a role, the audience has to imagine that the actor is not that person, but this role, the Hamlet or whatever, but the puppet is himself. The audience actually has to believe it's living, because the actor already is living and breathing, but the puppet is, they have to invest life in the puppet from their own heads. Now this, while it's very interesting, very exciting, it's a different kind of participation, I don't think it's comfortable for an adult to acknowledge that they have this duality in them, that they can believe something which doesn't exist because their logical brain knows something else. So knowing and believing simultaneously the two opposites, that something living is dead, that styrofoam is alive, that wood is breathing, that fabric is crying, is, I think, very embarrassing for the adult, especially when the lights come on. And I think this is one of the reasons that puppet theater remains on the fringes, because it's something which is inside of us. It's very, very deep inside, but we are not comfortable with it once we are not children anymore.
And I think this is why many puppeteers always say, well, I do puppetry for adults. It's very important to emphasize that we're not working just for children, although I have to say that working for children is not less important, and sometimes it's even more important, because we can't fix the adults.
No, we can't.
We can entertain them, we can make them think, we can't fix them. If we are going to make some influence on the world, if we're going to let someone fix what we already ruined, then we must invest in the young generation. So performing for, I think, I never had a problem. I'm performing just for children. That's, for me, it was more important than doing a performance for adults and having it like 3, 4, 5, 10 times. And then what? And with children, you can keep performing, keep saying what you have to say, and maybe one day we will get to see the fruits of what we did. We don't know. So we're about to finish. I would like to say thank you, Anurupa, for joining us today, and thank you, Anat, for agreeing to be the answer for a riddle. I will say something in Hebrew about the next week, but בשבוע הבא תהיה שיחה עם הצלם כפיר בולוטין, שיעזור לנו להבין איך אנחנו יכולים גם מהבית לשדרג את הפרסומים שלנו ואת הצילומים שלנו. בדרך כלל אנחנו נוטים או לקחת חברה, ואם יש לנו כסף גם לזכור צלם, אבל יש דברים בפירוש שאנחנו יכולים לעשות בבית. אנחנו ננסה ביחד איתו להבין מה זה אומר לצלם בובות, מה זה אומר לצלם שחקנים בבובות. זה יהיה בשבוע הבא, שזה יהיה ביום שלישי, בשעה 7, לא ביום רביעי, כי רביעי זה כבר ערב חג, אנחנו נכנסים כבר לתקופה של לפני אחרי החגים. אז אני רוצה לומר תודה רבה לצוות מרכז תיאטרון בובות שסייע, תודה רבה לחברה לבידור ולווידוי, לעיריית חולון, לבת חן שפיע וכפיר בולוטין שמייעצים לי, ולסגי גל שהוא עורך פסי הקול של היחידה השבועית. And again, thank you all, and we will hopefully find a way. We will see you soon.
Thank you.